Due to ShowPro's aggressive copyright takedown policy, this re-upload will be audio only, with the fully edited version available to my patrons, link in the description below. In my need to catch up on all the important sequels that have aired this year, I've finally gotten around to watching Pokemon X and Y, and it's pretty awesome. After over a decade of generic, formulaic, and emotionally lacking episodes, the Pokemon anime is finally back in full force and churning out just as much strong content, if not more, as it did in the first 5 seasons. By the way, if you want to see my full thoughts on those first seasons, you can click this annotation here. Before I write a full review of the series, there's one topic in particular that I feel the need to cover in its own dedicated video, that being how X and Y reuses old ideas from earlier seasons. I'm a little over 50 episodes in so far, and I've already noticed at least a dozen or so plot points or visual cues that have their roots in episodes from the late 90s and early 2000s, be it chasing a Snorlax out of town or exploring a sunken shipwreck. This idea of going back to older content and revising it for a new story is a practice that's prevalent in pretty much all forms of media, especially in anime. In his blog dedicated to the Macross franchise, Ghost Lightning refers to this sort of callback to older motifs as remembering love, as in it makes you remember why you loved those moments in the first place. And Pokemon X and Y is a fantastic example of how to do this. Instead of copying old plot lines verbatim, it takes small parts from those plots, revises them, and combines them with other elements to create something new. That way, the plots are fresh and exciting, but still retain that nostalgic sense to them, and this is easily one of my favorite things about X and Y. However, this also brings me to what the first X and Y movie, Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction, does so horribly wrong. Much like the TV series, Cocoon of Destruction has scenes that call back to beloved and iconic moments from earlier in the franchise, except these moments are implemented so poorly that it becomes a hot mess and makes me reject that nostalgia instead of welcome it. The rest of this video will contain heavy spoilers from Cocoon of Destruction and moderate spoilers from the X and Y TV series up through episode 33, The Bonds of Mega Evolution. If you have not seen the TV series up to that point yet, I highly recommend doing so as it is an excellent watch. If you haven't seen Cocoon of Destruction, don't worry, it's a pile of crap and I would never recommend watching it other than for analytical purposes. In the climax of Cocoon of Destruction, Yveltal has awakened from its slumber and is going on a rampage, using its signature move, Oblivion Wing, to drain the life from the surrounding forest and everything in it. Ash and Pikachu briefly engage Yveltal, but realize quickly that they are no match for this mythical creature. Diancie then Mega Evolves in order to acquire enough power to defeat Yveltal, but is still unable to do so. After some random side characters show up and sacrifice themselves to protect the others, Xerneas steps in and finally calms Yveltal down. Then, after the battle is already over, they notice that Pikachu was hit by one of Yveltal's attacks, thus petrifying him. Anyone who's even remotely savvy with older Pokemon films will immediately recognize the callbacks to Ash's petrification in Mewtwo Strikes Back. In theory, this would be the perfect idea to recycle, calling back to the very first Pokemon movie in the first X and Y film to further signify the rebirth of the anime franchise. And it might have succeeded if it had not executed this idea in such a ham-fisted attempt at provoking emotion and skimping out on almost every single element that made the original idea so powerful. To understand why this is the case, let's return to that scene in Mewtwo Strikes Back to examine how it was constructed. Ash's petrification comes at the absolute climax of the film, both narratively and emotionally. Mewtwo's clone army is facing off against the originals that they were copied from in a brutal and cruel battle to the death. As Mew and Mewtwo launch their final blows to determine who will be victorious, Ash jumps into the fray to stop the fighting, resulting in his petrification. As Pikachu tries desperately to revive Ash, the true gravity of what has transpired sets in on everyone present, and both original and clone Pokemon cry for the loss of this young boy who tried to stop them from destroying each other. Their tears, imbued with the power to restore life, eventually bring about Ash's resurrection after nearly 2.5 minutes of screen time with him being petrified. These two sides who fought so viciously against each other only minutes beforehand have come together in solemn unity to mourn his death, and through their combined efforts bring him back to life. Ash regains consciousness, his friends are exuberant at his return, and Mewtwo, realizing how wrong his didactic ideology is, ceases his plans to destroy and recreate the world. The sunlight has broken through the clouds of Mewtwo's storm, and the soundtrack, which had previously indulged in one of the most melancholic pieces to ever come out of the Pokemon franchise, transitions into a brighter and more triumphant melody as the scene ends. When you get deep into the analysis of what went into making this scene, it's no wonder why this is one of the most memorable and emotionally powerful moments in the entire history of the Pokemon franchise. It's not cinematic genius, but its simplicity strikes the perfect chord at the perfect moment. Now let's examine the parallel scene from Cocoon of Destruction. Right away you can tell something is off with this scene because Pikachu's petrification comes after Xerneas has already calmed Yveltal and the battle has ended. They show a flashback to Pikachu fighting Yveltal and a close-up on Pikachu's tail getting nicked by an Oblivion Wing burst. Putting aside the fact that Pikachu is the only one to show a delayed petrification, as everyone else who is hit by the attack petrifies immediately, the emotional weight of this scene is completely absent. It comes on so suddenly and without just cause that the audience doesn't have time to register that they're supposed to feel something here, and there's no sacrifice or anything of the sort being done for the greater good. Pikachu just happened to get attacked by Yveltal. The characters get sad over Pikachu's petrification, and then not even 40 seconds later, Pikachu is brought back to life. Not by the tears of those who fought against Yveltal, and not by Diance's newly awakened Mega Evolution powers, but instead by Xerneas, who hasn't even had 10 minutes of screen time in the entire film. How fucking emotional. Not only is Pikachu's petrification and follow-up mourning scene totally unearned because he's just a bit player in the plot that had unfolded up to that point, but reviving him so quickly after his petrification took away that tiny sliver of emotional weight that this scene barely had in the first place. And for me, this is what took the film from being just kinda bad to pretty damn awful. Cocoon of Destruction is easily the worst Pokemon movie I have ever seen, and I've seen pretty much all of them up to this point so far. Even in the pretty bad ones, there's still some kind of heart and creativity going on, some kind of fun adventure element or conceptually interesting idea being implemented. In Cocoon of Destruction, not only is the film not doing anything with the potentially interesting ideas that it has, but even the most basic elements of its story that could have generated some kind of pathos are lopsided, awkwardly paced, and terribly executed. Oh no, Pikachu's been petrified, this is kind of emotional. Maybe we could drag this out for a bit, and really reflect on the gravity of what's happened. Hey, maybe Diancie could be the one to save Pikachu with the powers that it gained after its long journey through— oh, Xerneas already healed him in like half a minute. Okay, how about that thing you were doing with Diancie's backstory and personality, with how she's kind of this clueless princess that's a little bit pompous or something? It was a little confusing what you were going for. Whatever. It's a total cliche, but hey, there are still some narrative possibilities here. Maybe you could have a few scenes showing how she's kind of disconnected from her own kingdom and really drive in the idea that she doesn't see revitalizing the Heart Diamond as that big of a deal. Or even show some kind of disconnect between her and the other Pokemon of the Diamond Country. Then when the Heart Diamond finally fails, you can drop all that regret and helplessness on her like a ton of bricks and show her the folly of her— oh, you're just gonna forget that this kingdom exists entirely until right before the climax of the film. And replace that time with scenes of Diancie shopping. Okay, that's cool. Alright. What about Yveltal? Such a cool and awe-inspiring Pokemon, literally the embodiment of death from Celtic and Norse mythology. Maybe you could make Yveltal more of a sentient being like Mewtwo and make it aware of the role it plays in the world and how it affects everything around it. Then you could have Ash and Diancie trying to reason with it and get it to stop, kind of like what they did with Mewtwo in the first movie and Entei in the third movie. Why don't you try something like that? Wouldn't that be kind of cool? No, you're just gonna make him a rampaging monster that Xerneas gets rid of at the end with no effort. Well, goddammit. This movie has so many cool ideas for a story and such a strong base for enacting that remembering love concept, and it does absolutely nothing with them. It took for granted that we would immediately recognize the moments it was calling back to and gave us the most basic, uninteresting, and poorly executed plot that I've ever seen from a Pokemon movie. I know some of you are thinking I'm being way too harsh on a children's film for not acting out some deep, complex narrative, but you know what does act out a deep, complex narrative? The Pokemon TV series. To give perspective on this, Cocoon of Destruction premiered in theaters about 2 weeks after the end of the Mega Lucario arc, which is possibly the greatest story arc that the Pokemon TV series in its nearly 20-year run has ever produced. And I only say possibly because I'm only about a third of the way through the series and I don't don't know if there's anything better that comes afterwards. Not only was it strong in both its writing and its animation, but it presented ideas on the trainer-Pokemon relationship in such a deep, emotional, and often dark and unsettling way that it had me glued to the screen for its entire run. It took its time to build Corina's personality from the ground up alongside her Lucario, gave insightful looks into how their relationship works and why it causes them problems during Mega Evolution, got Ash and the others invested in their struggle in a way that goes much deeper than the need to simply progress the plot, and delivers a fantastic climax that cuts right to the heart of what being a Pokemon trainer is really about. That is how you write a children's anime. As soon as I had finished rambling about this to myself the first time I thought of it, it immediately clicked to me why this movie that premiered shortly after such a fantastic arc was so awful. It's the exact same thing that happened to Hunter x Hunter. A TV series is so well written and extremely popular, but the movie counterparts are so lackluster, poorly written, and filled with horrible animation because most of the effort is being put into the TV series instead of the film. And in a big picture kind of way, that's totally fine. If getting a better movie meant skimping out on the Mega Lucario arc, then sure, give me the crap version of the movie so the TV series can stay strong. But it's still extremely disappointing because that's not what the Pokemon movies used to be. In the early years of the Pokemon anime, the movies were the absolute highlights of a given season. They were some of the best ideas that the writers came up with the entire year. Those first films presented such interesting stories in cool and inspiring ways that they couldn't help but be great and memorable. Mewtwo strikes back, a clone of a legendary Pokemon struggles to find purpose in its existence, and after dealing with so many terrible people for its whole life, decides that the world needs to be destroyed and recreated so that it and others like it can find a place they belong. Pokemon 2000, a natural catastrophe threatens to destroy the entire world, and Ash must find the power within himself despite all odds and self-doubt to save the world and everyone he loves, while also dealing with the pressures of being a chosen hero and living up to everyone's expectations. Spell of the Unknown, a little girl dreams up the physical manifestation of Entei as a replacement for her missing father, and then that Entei takes it upon himself to act out this role and kidnaps Ash's mom, forcing Ash to go on a dangerous mission to rescue someone precious to him. Sure, with the right wording, you can make Cocoon of Destruction sound just as interesting. A princess from an underground kingdom must go out and find a mysterious legendary Pokemon that can grant her the power to save her kingdom while also avoiding bounty hunters and the literal embodiment of death, but its execution is so narrow-minded and shallow by comparison that it doesn't matter. And yes, maybe it is unfair to compare it to the Takeshi Shudo trilogy since he was one of the writers who laid the groundwork for the Pokemon anime from its inception, but even in comparison to later films like Giratina and the Sky Warrior or Keldeo and the Sword of Justice, Cocoon of Destruction is unbelievably lacking in effort, creativity, and emotional core. And if I even start talking about how awful the animation is, I'll be here all day. In conclusion, we're still left with a bit of a conundrum, as trying to make better Pokemon films at this point would only be taking away from the effort being put into the TV series, and making sure the TV series continues to be as solid as it is should be a much higher priority than the films. I can understand what happened, and I can kind of accept why it happened, but I'm still really salty about it, and it makes me really skeptical about watching Hoopa in the Clash of Ages and Volcanion in the Mechanical Marvel. But for now, it's back to catching up on the TV series. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content, and check out my Facebook and Twitter for video updates and other ideas about what I'm watching right now. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.